The Gates of Heaven, the 13th of September 2024. Jerusalem is a word that has different meanings. The miracles of Fatima, the sun spinning in the sky and crashing to earth, which were seen by 80,000 or 100,000 people, including skeptics, including communists, including atheists. Final Fantasy, the crashing of the crystal world. If this event was seen, it means that it did happen, so there is some truth that they try to deliver, or more and more theories. I think that God gave us these physical miracles, especially today, like the Shroud of Turin and so forth, in part as a means of evangelization. What does evangelization mean? That the word in part was added into the statement. It is not conclusive to say about God something that we do not entirely know to be true. You know it is true, but you don't know it is actually true. It still contains some doubts and confusion because you do not know of the physical miracle that was presented. The Shroud of Turin may mean more than what it means to Catholics. It contains the face of a man. But what does that mean? It is also made apparent, somewhat unpleasantly for some persons, that it could be the blanket with which Jesus wiped his face, or a follower of Jesus. I had not done any research. Evangelization could mean to bring the good news of Jesus or any other prophet of God, including the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to the whole people. It is like saying that they are two faces of the same coin. It is where both the concept of a prophet and the concept of a messenger meet. It is when both of them brought good news about one another and told facts about one another, even if they had a time span difference of 600 years or more. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also said to tell the news about him, even if it were with the use of a verse in the Quran. He is all good, so that is why he was chosen. When his speech itself is divinely inspired, it means that it is said in a way that was divinely determined. In other words, whatever he spoke was already decided before his birth. That is why he had fully committed to his will and decisions. Unlike humans who are moved along, pushed around, or driven away from the path of God, but also, unfortunately, through their desires and decisions. Belief in predetermination and predestination is also made difficult when people would start to fiddle around with their own demise, trying to make things happen that should not happen, including being dragged around in a fashion only akin to the concept of giving up. God would not give up on me. Evangelization can keep its current meaning. In fact, let whatever happens happen. All everything really means is that they were all truthful. The ones we know to have existed once in their lives and the ones that we don't know. In fact, what if every person's beliefs were made to be the reality? What if the world is actually designed in such a way and because of the feelings of humans? What if every kind of torture is made because of humans and because of the ways they have invented to cause corruption on earth, because of the tiny percent of evil that was present in them upon their creation? What if some soil was actually destined to have been tainted with pure blood? Isn't that what Cain was said to have caused in the Bible? That the earth could not stop crying for the spilling of his blood upon the earth? Sometimes I feel like these things Thinking about these things and writing about them would be seen as an emotionless action, as though I would have to be senseless in order to speak about the incident, unable to feel how horrifying it was and it is. But what if it was forgivable? If God forgives Cain for what he did, would people be able to hold? It is horrifying, I would wonder. Unless you mean horrifying in the sense of it was a sad incident, I would consider it a sad incident, but it was jealousy that caused it. Jealousy, rage, and disbelief. Even the concept of disbelief can become considered a miracle. Evangelization could also mean bringing good news of his second coming. This concept had been present since the time Adam, peace be upon him, was created. When he was born, he saw the name of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and asked God what it means. It is written on the gates of heaven. Therefore, when Adam was sent to earth, he continued bringing good news of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, telling every one of his children that one of his lineage would become the messenger of God. The concept of a messenger sent from God to the people called Muhammad was shared with Adam. It is as though Adam had seen all of his children upon his creation, and God showed him the one child from his lineage who would look and act exactly as Adam had. In other words, God showed Adam the messenger who would cause people to come back to heaven, the reason why heaven was created, also named the origin of creation, for whom God promised to send mercy. Before the creation of the world, God wanted to be known, and therefore He created the world, so that He would be worshipped and glorified. If the world would ever reach the point in which it would not worship or glorify Him, He would come and destroy. It is not only science fiction if you think about it in a science fiction manner, it is true. If the world was going to become a place in which the name of God would not be mentioned anywhere on the surface of the earth, it would become a disgrace. It is natural for the earth, the skies, and the whole world to obey His will and thus be allowed to do whatever they are commanded to do. Everything in the heavens and the earth are bound to His will. It is not knowledge is power in the conception of this knowledge. It is that some people would find knowledge to be a source of power instead of using knowledge as a weapon. It was not using knowledge as a weapon that made me feel as though I was good enough. It was the idea that since they do not hear it, then it would cause them well-deserved punishment to be forced to do that. It is in the concept of an exorcist that the demon is essentially tortured out of a person. The land of Valhalla, mentioned and propagated by many people across centuries, speaks of a land that cannot be reached by anyone who is alive. A land where time makes no sense anymore. It is a land frozen in time. Whatever exists there are just fragments of what had been before. It seems akin to a time split that caused the earth to return to a barren land, uninhabited by humans, thus no living creature was tended to. It seems like it is what the world would have returned to had Noah not built the ark and saved them. Valhalla of Norse mythology is akin to a part of the timeline that is not decided. It is where decisions were made to keep some parts of the world intact. A place of memory that contains memories of places and locations that had been stepped on by people whom God had loved. Locations where people whom God loved had walked. Forgotten gardens and trees, a library of books showing different possibilities that would make things possible. It is a second strike of an imagination that sounds to be possible, that when no living beings remain, there has to be small reminders of those who had been the best of the best, even locations. It is similar to the whole world having its own memory pool, where places, locations, and objects that humans have built with their own hands would remain after the world is destroyed. When God does kill all living creatures at the end, it would be because he became very angry and wrathful. It would be no wonder that some objects would remain, because of which he would recreate the world anew. It is because of his people. If in every community and every tiny group of people God would call a person or a group of the collective his own, it would mean that he would only keep those people from death, thanks to these people he calls his own, those who believed in him, especially those who believed in his messages. Valhalla, in ancient myths, is a place where a person would reign. In Final Fantasy XIII, it is the place where chaos resides, where the only reason for the destruction of the world that resulted in this land being forgotten to time because of chaos or to propagate chaos. When multiverses collide upon themselves and the quantum understanding of the multiverse, they leave behind a gateway of corruption. It means that even dark holes would be the result of a world expiring into nothingness. This nothingness is also the result of fiction, which could also include science fiction and space. There was a movie I watched where a person was thrown into a dark hole, had time speed up for him so much that he penetrated the window of probabilities and the multiverses. Being inside the dark hole was the reason why he was able to travel back in time to his daughter, warn her about this incident happening to him in her future. His present being that he flew into space and was able to travel back in time to warn his daughter not to let him go to space. In other words, by going into the dark hole, which resembles the nothingness of matter, he was able to be shown the multiverses. By approaching nothingness, which can be seen as akin to the concept of the speed of light as we perceive it, greater possibilities and probabilities would be achievable, like time travel. Time travel is the best option when someone's death would not be decided yet. If someone is not to die in a dark hole but instead get back to life and continue what is remaining of his life, then time travel would be the option to keep his life intact. It is God who decides in matters of life and death. Schrodinger's cat experiment is a good example of that. If God is limited to two options, the whole world would be in danger. Therefore, the experiment in itself, to be practiced or put to the test, would cause a butterfly effect and cause chaos to spread without even having been a main reason for it. What if it's not the destiny of the cat to die? It would be very easy for God to prevent the death of the cat altogether by collapsing the building on top of the scientists who are conducting the experiment and causing the cat to be let out of the experiment box to be alive. It would be easy for God to do that. However, we are told of this experiment as an experiment to prove the multiverse theory and the parallel worlds theory, showing that the concept of the multiverse can easily be connected to the Spirit of God.